Okay, well, I'm getting the word we're on. Welcome to the Tree Fruit Growers Collective. Yeah, welcome to the Sunday night Facebook, YouTube Live. It's nice to have you on board tonight. Been a big week for us on the page. Yeah, we passed the 10,000 follower mark. I don't know how much of a big deal that is to me, but I guess it is kind of a big deal. When we started out this page, the hope was that if I could mentor 50 or 60 or 70 young and up and coming guys and gals that are wanting to get into the industry and learn more about high intensity tree fruit farming. That's kind of was the goal. But never did I dream that. Well, just this week we've had 1.2 million views. It's just hard for me to fathom, hard for me to imagine, but it's also encouraging for me because it gives me faith that we're having an impact and people are listening and hopefully you're learning from this. I know I am. Yeah, I don't always get it right, and I have to go back and do a little bit of research, and I've done some of that from time to time. But yeah, it's been nice interacting, getting to know a lot of you. I know, feel like I know many of you now. So yeah, welcome to the Sunday Night Live. We've thinning. We've been in thinning. I've shared with you some thinning videos. We're kind of pulled this time of year between trying to get going on thinning. We've got a long way to go. And I think that the doors are open. We could thin in about any block that we wanted to right now. Hey, Hayden, it's nice to have you on board tonight. We're going to get going on thinning real hard this week, but we are also in cherry harvest. So we're trying to ramp up our cherry harvest. We picked for a couple of days, and boy, we had a real nasty storm this week. I posted a little bit about that, but man, we had a nasty rainstorm that lasted for hours. 60-mile-an-hour winds probably saved us, and hail in pocketed areas. I feel for some of the people here in Washington that maybe caught some of that 2-inch hail that they're reporting, and that'll destroy a crop in a hurry. And so we had our hail cannons going. We were out there praying. We were doing everything we could to protect our crops. And the good news is the splits in the cherries oftentimes comes when the rain's coming down and that cherry's sitting there in the stem bowl. And the stem bowl fills up and the water spills over the. Well, there's a cherry right there. So I can give you a little example. There's that stem bowl right there. And what happens is the water fills up in that stem bowl when it's sitting like this and begins to come over the top, and it'll come right down to the bottom of the cherry where that little hole is. You can see in the bottom of the cherry right there, and it'll literally absorb that water right into the cherry, and it'll split it wide open. Especially if the sun comes out after the rainstorm, it'll really make those cherries pop. But so far so good. We waiting on a little sugar to come. We took the day off today and went to church. I'm sure the guys went to town and bought groceries and got stocked up for the week ahead. But yeah, we're going to really get into cherries this week. Just reminiscing about cherries while we're waiting for people to sign on here. Just reminiscing about cherries a little bit. Cherries my favorite part of the whole industry. I love cherries. I love growing apples. I love cherries. I think because it reminds me of my childhood. I grew up picking cherries with my mother and my father. My dad, he was a cherry picking machine. And back in those days, it was quite a bit different. We picked on the trees were 30, 40 feet tall, and my dad would pick on the wooden spike ladder. I don't know if you've ever seen those spike ladders, but they're just big, tall ladders that would kind of come together at the top. Wood, I can't imagine what those things weighed, but my dad would all the way up on the top of that 30-foot spike ladder, and my mom would be on a 14-foot wooden ladder picking cherries in the middle of the tree, and me and my brother picking at the bottom of the tree. And I even remember my little brother. He was just a baby in a wooden cherry box at the bottom of the tree, sleeping under the tree. So I got a lot of great memories having lunch out in the orchard with my family, a bologna sandwich and some sort of a dessert and a pop. That was a big deal to us back in those days. So it has a lot of sentimental value to me, and I really enjoy the cherry harvest. Things are just a minute, honey. Things are a lot different these days. We have pedestrian orchards, 10-foot ladders largely, but 10-foot aluminum ladders. We team pick into bins. That makes it quite a bit easier. Bin trailers. We use bin trailers rather than hauling the boxes out on trailers, and of course reefers. Now we pick them and we load them right straight into a reefer and cool those cherries down. So it's changed a little bit, but it's still the same. You still go out there with a pick and strap and a bucket. You used to use aluminum buckets, and now they have the plastic buckets with the little cushions in the bottom of them. But still the same thing. So yeah, I love the cherry harvest. Yeah, it looks like Brad Michaels on board, Satya Prakesh is on board, Dean Winchester's on board, it's nice to have you on board tonight. So yeah, excited about the cherry harvest. I was going to mention, we've had some really good cherry varieties come up here in Washington State. We've got the Benton cherry. I live here in Benton County. That came right out of this county at the research station here. We're picking Chelands right now. Fact is, these cherries right here are Chelands. That's our earliest cherry. Probably not the best cherry, but it's a good cherry, and it's a good early cherry. It gets us into the market early. It's a good starter to kind of get our feet wet and get to picking. That's a Chelan cherry, named after Chelan right here in Washington State. It was probably discovered in an orchard up there somewhere here in Washington. The Rainier cherry came right out of the research station over here. I can see the station from my house here. That's a light cherry, and I'm sure most of us know what a Rainier is. A wonderful cherry. Titan cherries came from just up the road up here, probably discovered in an orchard. So a lot of great cherry varieties have come out of the state of Washington, and it's just a great place to grow cherries. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and turn to the questions that you've had this week. I've tried to answer some of those as I've had time this week, but we're going to go ahead and jump right into them. Some good questions this week. Thanks for sending those in. What do we got there? Looks like Jack Ramal has a question. He says, here in the Alps, that's exciting, we cultivate Cosmic Crisp. The problem is we have the green spot. How do you manage it? Yeah, the green spot. It's not a huge issue here in Washington, but it is an issue. I've seen it. I've seen it in Cosmic. I've a little bit. I've seen it well, what other varieties? I've seen it in Honeycrisp and other varieties. I've seen the green spot in. I think of it when I think of green spot, and I know it's different. I think of it because the treatment is similar. I think of it like bitter pit because it's very similar. They're both calcium disorders, and the treatment, as far as I know, is the same. In other words, I don't think there's been any breakaway treatment for green spot that would set it apart from the treatments from bitter pit. For instance, I would call it a calcium disorder, so we want to treat for calcium, just like we've been talking about for bitter pit. You want to do those early fertigation applications up until about 40, 45 days after full bloom, and then I would switch over to the foliar applications of calcium after that. Talking about apples here, and of course the calcium in your fertilizer and the calcium in your soil. That's real important. Also crop load. That's very important. You want to treat it like it's calcium deficiency, so you want to get that crop load right. So yeah, green spot. We've got it here. It hasn't become a huge problem. The prevailing problem for us here in the way of calcium disorders is the bitter pit, and I feel for you because it's a terrible one. There's nothing will apple, and you get that spot, and you get close to harvest, and you have to drop it on the ground. So, thank you, Jack. I wished I could have helped more with that. Herbert Hall says on Cosmic Crisp, have you tried applying oxalic acid as either your foliar or root drench before frost and cold events? I haven't tried it. Heard about it. I know that it's used in tomatoes and mangoes and apricots, and I've heard of people trying it in apples. Um, I think it's one of those products that enhances antioxidant pathways and it creates kind of a systemic response. In other words, it charges up the immunity system and gets the plant prepared. We have done similar treatments for fire blight. We've done injections to kind of build up the immunity system for that plant and brace it. So although I haven't played with oxalic acid, I'd like to. There's probably value in it, and I know that it's been used in the vegetable fields for a long time. So haven't tried it, Hebert, but if you have some experience with it, you can share with us. I would appreciate that. Ishan Chahan says, we're facing serious problem with phytoplasma diseases in our cherries, colt rootstock. Our plants' branches dry up because of it. The roots remain healthy. Could you please suggest a solution? Boy, I wish I had a solution. Um, we're dealing with the Western X virus, the little cherry disease. We have a whole host of these different viruses. I sampled some trees just this week in a cherry block, and it came back with a virus that I hadn't heard of in years. And, they're all just a little bit different, but there are some that are real serious, and I don't know what you're dealing with, whether it's Western X or what it is. But the Western X and the little cherry field sanitation is so important. It's very important when you identify that you have one of those viruses. Most important thing is get it tested. We take a sample over to the research station. They'll sample those and get right back to us within a couple of days. Once you've identified that it does have one of those viruses or one of those diseases, the next step is take a chainsaw and cut the tree off and paint it with Roundup. The reason you do that is as the roots go out on that tree and it contacts other roots, neighboring trees, it will infect those other trees. So it's real important that you put the Roundup into the tree. So the Roundup is also going to go out and affect the roots of whatever tree that it happens to be touching, and it will you'll see the signs and symptoms of Roundup damage in those trees, and that's also your sign and symptom. Those trees are connected, and they probably have the Western X or the little cherry disease in them also. At which time you'd want to cut those off too. The key to the key to these type of viruses is to get them out of the ground, and the trees around them, get them out of the ground. It hurts. You're going to end up with a big hole of a half acre in the middle of a block. But that's really the key. You want to get it out of the field and get it burned and just get rid of it as fast as you can. Sorry to hear about that. I don't know about it specifically with Colt. I haven't had Colt rootstocks in quite a little while. We talked about Colt rootstocks last week. I've kind of moved away from those. I think most people in Washington State here probably have moved away from Colt rootstocks largely. But I understand you have the rootstock that you have, and that's what you have to farm. But field sanitation is the key. Identifying what they are and getting them rooted out of there is really all we have right now. Jordan McIntyre. I was kind of late grafting scions onto some apple rootstocks, and half of them failed. Rootstock growing nicely, though. What would you recommend next? Chip or tea budding, and when to do it? Yeah, this happens to us every year. Jordan, I'll tell you what I do. I think that probably at this point, what happens is the reason you would want to graft early on in the spring. You have this window of opportunity where that layer of bark will kind of separate. The cambium layer kind of separate from the tree there, and you're able to get a T graft down in there, or a stick down in there. But once we get beyond this time of the year where that bark kind of constricts around the tree, I would move to chip budding, and you can chip bud all the way up into the fall. So you can do it all the way through the summertime, all the way up into the fall. Yeah, it's not too late to get those trees going. I'd get somebody out there and see if you can chip bud them just as soon as you can. But that's what I would do. I would bud them over. So good question. Thank you. Sheikh Nasir says, how to control the excessive vegetative growth in third year M9 Gala apple. Please suggest. Well, for me, I like vegetative growth at a third year M9 Gala apple tree because I'm really trying to fill the space. So I really like to grow a tree just as hard as I possibly can, all the way up until the fourth year. And as soon as the tree's completely filled its space, then I'll begin to calm that tree down. But if you're in the third year, um, I'm not sure you'd want to calm you'd want to begin taking the vigor out of the tree until you filled your space. But if you have filled your space, yeah, things that you can do is where are you at? Sheikh Nasir. I'm not sure where you're at, but what we would do is after the summer solstice, we would come in and prune those trees. It's called summer pruning. Summer pruning versus winter pruning. Pruning here. Dormant pruning has a invigorating effect, and summer pruning has a deinvigorating effect. So one of the ways that you can pull the vigor out of that tree is to summer prune it. You could pull the water back and do some sort of a deficit irrigation program, and you can begin to pull back the fertilizer on those. Dial down that nitrogen and bring that down to a manageable level. Once we get a tree into production like a Honeycrisp or something, I won't put more than about 5 pounds of nitrogen on that tree in a year. If I don't have to, I'll do foliars and whatnot, but we'll really pull back the nitrogen on some of those. So those things begin to pull back the nitrogen. Deficit irrigation, begin to pull back the water. Consider summer pruning. That'll pull the vigor out of that tree, but nothing's going to pull the vigor out of that tree more than setting a crop on it. Go ahead and, next year you're going to want to set some apples, and the way you're going to do that is get in there this year, and some of those real vigorous limbs, get you a string and get them pulled down. And as you pull those down, they'll set fruit buds, and the best thing you can do is get some apples set on there. Oh my goodness, we got Irlene on board, and Harold, and Kekna, and Biku Ronta, and Nikish, and Sahad, and Mariada Martinez, and Ian McGregor. Looks like we've got a lot of people on board tonight, so welcome. It's nice to have you on board. Deepak Shahan on chemical thinning. What can we use for feathering in nursery? Maxell or Promlin, Perlan, or a combo of both? Promlin, Perlan, same thing. Maxell on galas for size enhancement. I've used Maxell for thinning on pears, on galas. I've never used it for feathering in nurseries, but I know people that do. So I can't really speak to that because I don't have experience with it. I've always used Promlin or Perlin, and you can simply do that. Um, Boy, but I'm not a nursery person. I know there are great nursery people on here that can maybe speak better to that. But when I'm feathering a tree, normally I get a good feathered tree from the nursery. But if I don't, I head the tree at 32 inches, and that always breaks me some good feathers off a tree and gets them where I want them. And if I want to induce feathers or limbs where I want them, I will notch with a little scroll saw or just a real small blade, and I'll use Perlman. That's how I'll do that. A lot of people just spray those buds with Perlman. I'm not an expert on that, but my experience is in nursery and in feathering trees is a combination of scoring with just a little scroll blade and Perlman, or just spraying Perlman. So, Mir Yasir says the best time to do scoring and girdling. Well, they're two different things. The scoring is what we were just talking about. That's where you want to score a half inch above bud to induce a break out of that bud or to get it to push a limb out. I would do that at bud swell. As soon as those buds start swelling, I'd get out there and start scoring. People used to tell me all the time, I ate too early on that. It needs to push a half inch, and that's nonsense. As soon as those buds start swelling, get out there with your little blade or your little serrated knife or anything really to break that cambium layer about a half inch above that bud. Even better yet, if you can get a little Perlan or Proman and put a little bit of that in there. Even better yet, but you want to do that as soon as the buds start pushing. Girdling, I always say that you can girdle anywhere up to a couple weeks before full bloom, do a couple weeks after full bloom. That 1 month window there is probably the ideal time to do that. So 2 weeks before full bloom up till 2 weeks after full bloom. I know there's a lot of people with big commercial orchards that have to get out there and do that a lot earlier than that, and they go a lot later than that. But if I was going to have a prime window of opportunity to just do a few trees, I would do it right at full bloom, right in that time frame. So, good question. Shangri-La Farms in India, Cosmic Crisp won't be very successful as it takes 220 days to be compared to Galen Red. He's talking about, yeah, they need chilling hours. It will be economically far more expensive with fungicides and pesticides to keep it healthy before harvest. Any suggestion would be helpful. I think you're going to have a hard time getting Cosmic Crisp trees outside of the state of Washington. I have heard that there are trees in New Zealand. I heard that from somewhere. That's the only place that I've heard of. Could be some in Australia, but I do know that it's real hard. There's kind of a moratorium on those Cosmic Crisp, and they've kind of been reserved for the people in Washington State and the people that develop those for a certain amount of years. I think you can probably understand with the investment we have into that apple. But I think it's going to be a little while before you're going to be able to lay hands on that. Brad Michael, when fruit buds grow branches out of them, what happens to those little branches? I thought all those little branches were going to be leaders and cut them off, but I think they were all fruit buds. I see every bud that has fruit has a little branch growing. Should I remove these large branches, 3/4 diameter, that I cut all the fruit buds, 3/4 diameter, that I cut all the fruit buds off of and start a new leader? How do I know what to prune so that I don't prune all of the fruit buds off? The fruit buds sometimes look like little branches, though. Well, that's a really good question. Let's see if I can get my little. What he's talking about here is I've been talking about this system where the tree grows. Let me just draw this real quick right here. All right, this is my tree growing up here, and the tree comes up and it branches off of these wires here. We've been talking about that. I've been drawing this picture for you. All right, that's kind of what that tree does there. What he's talking about is what we call dards, and that's these little branches that grow up off of that lateral branch. See right there? That's those little. We call those dards. And what's happening to his tree is his dards are just getting real long and growthy, and they're just growing into these big tall limbs. And we really want this window to be open so sunshine gets in there. And I'm going to tell you, I've learned this the hard way. I used to have those big long limbs too. The problem with those big long limbs is they might set a fruit bud right up here on the end, and you'll block all your sunshine out of here, and you have this big old long limb with a fruit bud on it, right? So you don't want that. What you want to do is you want to, while this thing's really short, you want to control it, and you want to keep that thing real short. So when it grows up here, you stop it and you set a terminal bud on there. Now, there's a few ways to do that. One cool way is a really cool product that we've had on the market now for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years called Apogee or Kudos. We can spray that now on a growing limb, and it will stop that limb. And sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times, but it will not only stop that from growing, but it'll stop it and it'll set a terminal bud. And that's what we want. We want to keep that real short, and we want to set a terminal bud on that because what we're doing is we're creating fruiting positions. So number one, I love the tool of apogee because it enables us to do that in a really unique way and a very successful way. Not all of us have access to apogee. So what can we do? Well, we just talked about summer pruning. By the way, if these are 3/4 inch, those are way too big. If anything is competing with your central leader, if anything's 3/4 of an inch, that's way too big. We're talking pencil size. You want these darts to be no more than bigger than pencil size. You want them to be real small and probably about that tall right there, 3 or 4 inches tall. You want to keep them real short. But there are ways to do that. One way to do it is through deficit irrigation. One way to do it is a weaker fertilizer program so that they don't get vigorous and out of control. But another way to do it, probably the way you're going to want to do it, is through summer pruning. So go out here in the summertime. If they're real strong, just cut them back to about 2 buds and try to get a new one to come out of there. Try to get a new position. But if it's a nice one that's pencil size, just come down and cut that about 4 inches tall. It's not going to get wound up because it's a summer pruning cut. It's a de-invigorating cut, and what'll happen is just like the apogee, it'll set a fruit bud on the top of that thing. So I hope that helps. That's what I would do. That's some tricks that I would do. You can even do that with a normal tree, but if your limbs are upright up, you're going to want to get them pulled down. So that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. Let's see where I'm at here. Shokar Dar. I have a site with 600 plants. I put a heavy load of fruit on one plant and its central leader. Growth stopped, and now it's not showing any sign of growth. Any solution? Yeah. I wish I knew how old these trees were. I really try to wait until the tree gets to the top wire before I start loading up that central leader with fruit because that's exactly what will happen. It'll stop those things from growing. It'll stop them dead in their tracks. So the one thing you can do is when you thin them, thin all the way, 2 feet down from the top of that central leader and take all that competition off of it so it pushes all that growth into the central leader. That's one thing that you can do. Sometimes you get yourself in a situation where you just overdid it and that thing spurred up and it stopped growing and it's just not growing anymore and you're wondering if it's ever going to grow again. In that case, what will happen is the tree is going to send you a safety mechanism. A tree will have a way when it's struggling. It's one of its lifelines. Its way of surviving is it will throw a sucker. So if you're to the point where that tree is completely shut down and it's not growing, look for a strong dominant sucker and cut off the tree that's already growing. Grow to that strong dominant sucker and get it to the top wire. Don't fruit that thing up until you get into the third or the fourth leaf until that thing's made it to the top wire. Then you can begin to fruit that thing. But you probably fruited a little bit too early. Cesar Lopez is on board. Welcome. Absar Atop is on board. Bosch is on board. Jerome, nice to have you on board tonight. And Yvonne Mendoza is on board. Nice to have everybody on board tonight. Thank you, everyone. Shokar, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, that's why we talk about this all the time. When it comes to tree training and pushing those young trees, the key to high intensity farming is to get those trees into production as fast as you can. And the way you do that is you drive that central lead to the top wire. So don't do anything that, whether that's setting fruit or setting too many limbs off of it. The focus and the priority should be getting that central leader to the top wire. Barry Bodenbaugh says, I'd like to see your cherry harvest. I've seen your cherry trees look natural instead of using V-block trellises. Why not use espalier? Espalier is what we would call a vertical trellis, or just like my trees back behind me here, it's a vertical trellis on wires. Barry, I don't like cherry trees and wire. Cherry trees and metal, cherry trees and wire just do not go together. Even when I'm using a spreader on a cherry tree, I won't use a spreader with a nail. Even that nail going into the bark, they'll get bacterial canker, they'll get gummosis. They'll just instantly begin to get problems. You can put a wire next to a cherry tree limb. Those cherry trees are like a weed. If you ever cut the bark on a cherry tree and smell it, they're like just glorified weeds. And they'll grow like a weed if you let them. If you let a cherry tree get anywhere near a wire, within a year it'll grow completely around that wire. Bark inclusion will set in, gummosis will set in, all types of problem will set in. Not that I haven't used wires, not that not using wires right now. I am using wires right now, but in a cherry block, I'm real careful to do it in a way that when I tie that limb to, like on a V trellis, I'll use a wire just to keep it from falling over, but I'll tie it with a big wide rope or something so that the wire is not making contact with the cherry tree, because cherry trees and wire just do not go together. And that's the short answer to why I don't put cherries on trellises. Some people do. Some people are real successful with it. I've also seen very large corporations go in, put 60 acres of cherries on V trellis, and 2 years later take it back out, because you can have real problems with it. So, my personal opinion, I'm sure there's a lot of people on here right now that are very successful with trellises and cherry trees. I just don't do it. The other reason I don't do it is cost. It costs a lot of money. It costs $40,000 to $50,000 to put in a block of apples these days. A modern apple system. Sometimes we want to put in cherries, and that's a lot cheaper to do because you don't have the big expensive trellis systems. You can put that in there and put a little 2-inch stake on it and get it up and get it into production. And it's not the giant, huge investment that you might have into other things. So that's another reason I would do it is cost. But mainly, cherry trees and wire, or cherry trees and metal do not go well together. Nitish Kamita says, "Hello, sir. Here in Himachal, India, do chip graft early in July before our monsoon season. So we cut root above chip after 25 to 30 days or in dormant period." Boy, I hate to speak of India, but I'll just say what I said before, and that's here. It's a matter of how constricted is the bark. When the bark becomes constricted and I can't do a T graft or a stick graft anymore, then I'll go to bud grafting. And we've had real good success with bud grafting anywhere through the growing period. And I think you probably could here in India also. So anywhere through that growing period where that plant's pushing, I think you could successfully chip bud. Looks like that for you is January, February. So that's probably opposite of what we see here. So good question. Brian Corcoran responded to post. What you want us to show? Spray schedule, please. Yeah, again, I never give spray rates on this page. I have an applicator's license. I'm just not comfortable doing that. But I did do a little video this morning because I sprayed my little apple trees this morning. So I just had a couple products that I had out that I sprayed yesterday. Typical spray program for apple trees, cherry trees for that matter too. Is in the dormant season you're going to do a dormant spray, and that's gonna kill all the bacteria and the little overwintering bugs and eggs that are out there in the field. And beyond that, we follow the models for the codling moth flight, and that flight usually comes in, about this time of the year. In the middle of May, we'll start to get that flight, and so we spray something for codling moth. And of course, we have problems. We can have mealy bugs here, and of course, mildew can be an issue. Aphids can be an issue, and so we spray for all of those things. So, successful spray program for us is we have scouts out in the field. We have a real integrated pest management program. We want to maintain as many predators as we can in the field, and only spray very targeted sprays that are only targeting the insects that we want to get. So that's the primary things that I would control this time of the year. Keep the mildew out of the trees, keep the codling moth out of the trees. Watch the thrips and lagus and anything else going to sting those apples. So again, you can get a good crop protection guide from the research station. It'll really give you a detailed spray regimen. I'd suggest you do that. Lucas Marczak. Let's see. Wait a minute here. Sheik Nasir. Same thing happened with our M9 Gala. Excessive vegetative growth. Alternate bearing. What to do, please. We've been talking quite a bit about alternate bearing for about the last month. So yeah, those things. It's a really, really bad situation. You can consider scoring. We've got a lot of videos in the school that we have here, which is kind of a record of different things that we've taught on. Summer pruning is a good way to bring those under control. Dialing back your fertilizer program. Also pulling those limbs down. If they're real vegetative and they're just trying to grow upright towards the sun, consider getting in there and pulling some of those limbs down and see if you can set some fruit buds on those. Yeah, wish I knew what year those were. Moon Nursery on video posted fertilizing young trees. Hello, sir. Please tell me how I can get more and more vegetative growth in the nursery. The only way I know how to do that is fertigate. Fertigate. Push those trees with a good fertilizer mix. I mean, even Miracle Grow from the hardware store. That's really a great fertilizer mix because it dissolves well in water. You can fertigate with it, and it's got all the nice. It's got NPK and all the little micronutrients. That's what you're really looking for a good fertigation program. Something that breaks down into solution really well, and it's going to be taken up into that plant. But what I would do is if I wanted growth in the nursery or young trees, what I do is number one, get that tree secured some way so that it's not blowing around. If that tree's blowing around in the wind, it will stop growing automatically. So keep the roots anchored and keep it from blowing around. And secondly, just push them with fertigation, probably twice a week. I would probably be doing 10 to 15 pounds of N per application, or until the fringes of the leaves begin to burn just a little bit. But just push them as hard as you can. For me, that's the name of the game when it comes to young trees, getting them to feather well and getting them to grow. So I'm not really a nursery guy, but that's the approach I would take. Nishan Thakur on thinning video posted, what do you apply for biggest leaves? I think what he's talking about is one of the comments that I made that I always make is and it applies for apples too. Big leaves, big cherries. You want to, those leaves. That is your. I always call them the solar panels of the tree. Bringing in sunlight and converting that sunlight into energy, and that tree, that plant, in turn, using that energy to grow and to produce an apple. That's a very very important aspect, and that energy comes from the photosynthesis and those leaves. So it's real important that we have big, strong, healthy leaves. The way to do that is a good nutrient program, making sure you have healthy trees. And for me, if it's cherries, that's really where I want big leaves. I want big leaves in cherries. Big leaves equals big cherries, I always say. So a good uh, foliar program starting about at the pink spray or pink timing. Big leaves, that comes from good nutrition, good fertigation, good fertilizer program. Lucas Markshak, pedestrian orchard. I love it. I try to keep my orchard this way. Problem is, I can pick 90% of the fruit from the ground, but the workers can't. Lots of them lower than my 183 centimeters. Okay. Well, it sounds like you're a pretty tall guy. So, yeah, you're gonna have to get those guys a little short ladder. So, or make your trees just a little bit shorter for them. But that's great. That's fun. I'm glad to hear it, Lucas. It sounds like a great orchard. Gulzan Ahmad says, please mention ideal timing for spraying calcium in cherries. Sir, can V spray gibberellic acid in full bloom stage in cherry? I'll start with the second question first. I like to spray gibberellic acid at the straw stage. And I always, as a caution, when I talk about gibberellic acid, I always say make sure that you don't have a windstorm for the next 3 or 4 days. I got some feedback on this week on the channel, but I assure you, if you spray gibberellic acid and it rains in the following 2 or 3 days, those cherries will split like you've never seen them split before. I'll tell you that from experience, and I think any experienced cherry grower will say the same thing. If that's just a very dangerous scenario, you don't want to do that. When to spray calcium? I like to spray calcium all the way from the pink timing all the way up till about probably straw or a little bit after straw timing. There's probably a month window there after from about pink timing. There's a period of about a month there. What I would go on about once a week with those calcium sprays. Should be enough for the cherries, and then of course you're going to want to have the calcium in dry fertilizer. James Skipper says on the thinning video posted, do you do the same for peaches? It is similar for peaches, but peaches, you'd want to pick the peaches. They won't flip off the way that we were talking about for an apple, where you kind of wind your finger around the stem and push it off of the stem. A peach won't do that. A peach, you'll have to pick off the individual peach. But the spacing on the peaches that I was talking about, or on the apples that I was talking about, yeah, I do the same spacing on the peaches. I love growing peaches, grown them all my life, and yeah, but the spacing and that sort of thing is very similar, but how you remove it is going to be different. So, good question, James. Tariq Manwar, please, what is the treatment for leaf miner insects? Yeah, well, the good thing is the treatment for leaf miner insects is the same treatment for thrips as for codling moth, as for leaf rollers and leaf miners. They all kind of fall into that same category. Good product would be a Delegate or some sort of a spinosad like that. Delegate is a product I'm currently using right now. So something like that works for that whole spectrum of insects. I'll say them one more time: thrips, codling moth, leaf rollers, leaf miners. Some of the ones that I was mentioning earlier in the leaf program. Delegate, and there are similar products to Delegate that work really well for that. These are nursery questions, just like the ones that I asked from Mayron and a name that we couldn't read, but same as the nursery question. But it's nice to thanks for sending the questions. I appreciate that. Appleview Orchard says, "What is the purpose of leaving the stem, the peduncle stem?" Um, the reason for leaving the stem is it's just a lot easier to thin them. A lot of times, what happens is and really, it's the easiest way to get them off. Now, I would say that on Honeycrisp or some varieties that have a thin skin, sometimes we want to pick the apple off because we don't want to leave that big hard stem behind because it will puncture other apples. But when we are popping the apple off of the stem, the reason for doing that is number one, it's just a lot easier to get the apple off. The thinners have just gotten real fast at grabbing those and popping them off. But probably the primary reason is when you have apples grouped up in two or three apples, that stem's kind of connected together down at the bottom. And if you pull one of those apples off, sometimes the other two will come off with it. And we don't want that. We want to be real selective about which of those 3 or 4 apples in that cluster we're taking off. And the best way to do that is just to pop the apple off. Because if we try to peel the stems, sometimes we peel off the wrong apple or all of it will peel off. That's why we do that. Okay, we're gaining on. Okay, well, I worked our way through the ones from this week, but it looks like we've got some other ones came in. That's great. Thanks for sending those in. Let's see what we got here. This is Hayden Sarsfield. Says, "Hey, I'm a 300-acre Honeycrisp grower. That is a big Honeycrisp grower. That is a lot of Honeycrisp. Wow. Nova Scotia, Canada, and I'm looking into planting a 5 to 10 acre block of cherries to fill in time for the labor during slow times in between apple jobs." That's a great idea. "What's the best row system and spacing you feel?" I have been over and over this my entire life. And for Geisler rootstocks, and I'm going to say you're probably going to be similar in Nova Scotia, Canada. By the way, you guys got a good cherry program up there in Canada and Penticton area and whatnot. But anyway, I would do an 8 by 16. That for me, I really like that for cherries. 340 trees per acre. That's a real good spacing. Gives those trees room to grow. You could even spread them out a little more than that. Thing about a cherry tree is you plant those trees and you'll do a 3-liter system, and you'll find that in 5 years you're back in there taking one of those liters out. They kind of start off slow, but boy, when they really get growing, they fill in that space. They'll fill in their whole space, and you don't have to be in there pruning them and confining them to their space. But you also, the trade-off is you want to get them to production quickly also. So you do want to get them as practically close together as you possibly can. For me, I've learned over the years, anytime I plant an apple block now, I plant it on a Geisler rootstock at an 8 by 16 spacing. I hope that helps, Aiden. Good luck. And yeah, I'm really interested in your 300 acres of Honeycrisp. Wondering if you have good altitude there. The Honeycrisp, they like that high altitude, and sounds like a great place to grow Honeycrisp. So yeah, thanks for calling in. Nitish Gimletta says, "For high density plantations, which rootstocks should we go to for Cosmic Crisp?" I like the Geneva rootstocks. I'm a big fan of the Geneva 11. I'm a big fan of the Geneva 41. Big fan of the Geneva 890. I've been getting a lot of questions about rootstocks. I was driving down the road the other day and I was talking to Marlon about that. And I said, sometimes I feel a little skittish talking about rootstocks because I might have a Geneva 890 down here in sandy soil down in the Tri-Cities down here, and that tree's just a horse. By the 3rd year, it has so much horsepower, it's already filled its space and it's already picking, 80 bins per acre. That's a reality. I actually have that situation right now. But I'll have that same rootstock on the same tree from the same nursery, and I'll plant that in a heavy soil up in Upper Yakima, and that tree will be just as calm as it could be as calm as a Bud 9, just depending on the soil, even with that horsepower. So the point is that 8 90 or that 41, depending on what soil it's in, it's going to have different characteristics. It's not going to grow the same. So you really want to weigh that when you're trying to decide whether, in those Geneva rootstocks, in that range of Geneva rootstocks, what you're putting in. In other words, in that same heavy soil, I would never put in a Bud 9. It would take me years and years, and I would probably never ever fill the space. So I really want to put in the highest horsepower tree that I can get, an 890. On a sandy, loamy soil where I can grow a tree really fast, I don't have any problem getting them up to the top wire. I don't have any problem planting a Geneva 11, Geneva 41, even an 890. But on an 890, you might want to move the spacing out a little bit. Instead of planting them 2 feet apart like you would with a Geneva 11 or a 41, you might want to move them out to 3 or 3.5 feet apart. So I think it's real important that the way that I did it early on is I bought some 41s and I bought some 11s and I bought some 969s, and I put the same tree on them, and I nurseryed them in a row so that I could learn the difference in the soil that I was going to plant. So it's real important. Gosh, that was a lot for a small question. Which rootstocks do we go to for Cosmic Crisp? It's real hard for me to say without knowing your soil. If you have a real heavy soil where it's hard to grow in, I would go with the 890 or 969. If you have really good growing soil, I would probably use a Geneva 11 or a Geneva 41. I hope that helps, Natish. If you want to narrow it down, give me a little more information, I could probably make a little better recommendation for you. Jerome Empey, a subscriber, he says, what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities or threats to our industry? That's a good question, Jerome. I'm almost 63 years old. I've been in this industry a long time. I've seen the rises and fall of this industry. I've seen companies go out of business over the years, and really seen three major downturns in the industry over the years. Um, it's always the same problem. Um, Oversupply. Us farmers, we hear of a good thing. Somebody hears of a new variety out there, and we all got to go out there and plant 100 acres of it. And pretty soon we're just oversaturated with a good thing. So that's the problem with with we farmers. We shoot ourselves in the foot, and we always do too much of a good thing. So that's my rant about that. I think that's one of the issues. So we need to control of our planting. I think the industry's been good about over the last 2 or 3 years, voluntarily removing our weakest acreage and our low production acreages. I think it's getting us back into a good position. We're seeing the market kind of turn back up now, and it looks like things are getting better. What are the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities? Well, it depends on your area. You have to use your strengths to your advantage. The strength that he might have up in Nova Scotia, Canada, up there might be different than the strengths that we have here. Maybe he has high altitude Honeycrisp up there, and that's something that he can capitalize on and market and really use to his advantage. We have some things going for us here in Washington. We have a great growing climate. We have great volcanic soils here to work with, and we grow a great quality product. I mean, we can grow a really good apple here in the state of Washington and in other areas. So I think you have to find your niche and see what works to your advantages. But what's the strength to the industry? The greatest strength of the industry is the American farmer, and farmers in general. Farmers are just a unique breed of people that work with the soil. They're intelligent people. They care about the land and the trees, and so the strengths of the opportunities of the industry is the farmer, the guy out there walking the block and learning and growing and learning how to till the soil. So I'm an optimist. I have high hopes for the tree fruit industry, and that's why I have this channel. That's why I'm trying to leave behind a legacy to help other people that are up and coming as I begin to step out and look towards fishing a little more in the coming years. Himalaya Gaming solution for dogwood borer from below the grafting union. I don't know the answer for that. I know dogwood borer. I don't know that we have dogwood borer, but we have shot hole borer and we have borer. And one thing is you want to be clean. You want to look around the fields and make sure there's no old wood laying around that they'll nest up and lay eggs in those and breed and field sanitation, that's real important. I don't know what the treatment's going to be for that in your area. G6 you had a second question. G969 versus G890, which is more productive? I've got them both planted the same year. Planted, in neighboring blocks, um, and those very productive. If I had to say which one is more productive, maybe the 969 because it's just a little bit weaker and maybe has just a little higher bud density. But I'll tell you that G890, I had fears early on that it was going to be so strong that it would alternate, but I haven't seen that at all. That tree was in full production by third leaf, and boy, it hasn't let up one little bit. It has a full crop every single year. I love 969 and 890. I think they're very similar trees. Very similar. 890 probably has just a little bit more horsepower. Sahad Farouk says, which rootstock is best for UFO cherry system? UFO cherry system. We've talked about that a little bit. UFO basically is it's almost like a wine grape plant where it comes up in a trunk and that has a couple cordons that come off. I know we shouldn't be calling them cordons, but I'm going to call it a cordon. So it comes up from a trunk, comes into a cordon, and then you have shoots that come up in the air. You'll have these vertical shoots that come up off of it. And the idea is they fruit these vertical shoots, and then when they begin to become dominant or non productive, they prune them out of there and they grow up a new one. So they're always renewing and they always have real new, fresh fruit. And it's a pretty good system. I think it's pretty labor intensive, but I do have friends, close friends, that have this system. I've never grown it. I've been following it for the last 20 years. Seems like a great system if it's managed correctly. I've also seen it not managed correctly, but I think if you manage it, UFO is a great system. Which rootstock to use? I would use a Geneva 6 and not a Geneva, I'm sorry. I would use a Gisela 6 or a Gisela 12 is the two rootstocks that I would recommend. Harold King says, what do you do for bird control in the cherries? Mine got clobbered here in Maine by the crows and birds. I always have I always jokingly say, but it's true. The key to bird control is do just a little bit better job than your neighbors do. I say that jokingly, but it's kind of true. Those birds are so predictable that we do everything to make sure that bird is skittish and he is not comfortable in our cherry orchard. He's going to be more comfortable going down to the road to the neighbor that doesn't have bird control. We do everything. We got the little dancing jennies out there that have a compressor, and we move those around every day. We had the Bird Guard folks on here a couple weeks ago, and they did a video with their Bird Guard squawkers. We use those. We have a lot of those. We deploy those, sometimes 4 to a cherry block. We'll put those out there and we'll move those around. Those are predatory calls. So we use the bird guards. We use bird cannons. We move those around. We have industrial lasers that we put out to go around the edge of the blocks where the birds tend to set and roost and kind of dive bomb the orchards. We use everything. We throw the book at it. We do all of the above. If we have a really, really bad bird situation, I don't like to do it, but I have done it. We'll spray sugar. We'll go out there and we'll do 3, 4 applications of sugar. You're saying, Rob, you spray sugar? That's right. C&H sugar. Go buy the big old bags of sugar, put it in the sprayer, and go out there and spray it on the trees. And I guess the way that it works is the birds love it. They get in there and they start eating those cherries with that sugar on them, and they get a bellyache and they can't eat anymore. Problem is, you got to lose quite a few cherries before the sugar actually stops to work. It's sticky, but it does work. It'll keep flocks of starlings away and flocks of robins away, but I don't do it unless it's a last resort. So, Harold, great question. Bird control, I do everything. All of the above. Throw the book at it. James Watson from the school. Hi, Rob. Last year we planted some apple trees on M7 rootstock. I noticed this year they have the problem of too much vegetative growth, and I want to channel it. Some of it into reproductive growth for next year. What are the best methods for it? Okay. Well, I just planted these last year. So again, if you're going to try to get them into production in the second year, I'd be careful about that. I don't like to crop trees until the third leaf, but you know what? These are second leaf trees over here, and I'm cropping them right now. So there are exceptions to that, but you want to have a good, strong tree that's already made it up almost to the wire. You're confident it's going to make it to the wire. Otherwise, if you crop those too early in the second leaf, it'll shut that tree down and it'll never make it to the top wire. But your question is I have a vegetative tree, and I want to begin to calm it down, and I want to be able to get some fruiting position. And the way you do that is begin to get good out there, and some of those limbs that you want to save, those pencil-sized limbs, begin to pull those limbs down. And as you begin to pull those limbs down, they'll begin to set fruit buds. They'll set little darts, and they'll begin to set fruit buds. So begin to pull those limbs down that you want to fruit. Beyond that, I wouldn't do too much different until you get that tree to the top wire. Once you get that tree to the top wire, we can talk about a whole host of things to settle that tree down and to get it into bearing and get good fruit color and all of these sort of things. But if you're only going into the second leaf, about the most I'd want to do is begin to pull limbs down so that they'll start to set darts and fruit buds on them. Good question, though. Tony Hurst, 6544. Those you talk are for apple trees. What about peach trees? Yeah, I don't talk a lot about peach trees because we pulled out all of our peaches. They kept freezing on us, but I've grown peaches all my life. I'm familiar with peaches. I don't know if I'm an expert in peaches, but I got a couple peaches right back here behind me. I'm sorry. I'll try to talk a little more about peaches. We'll try to stop in and talk a little bit more about that. I know I talk a lot about apple trees because we got a lot of apple trees right here. So, but thank you. Appreciate the input. Ballpreet Gill, do you find gypsum to be beneficial for cherry farms? Well, it depends on what the situation is. It depends on what your pH is. I like to use gypsum. It's a great form of calcium, so it'll help with the a good strong crisp cherry. It will help with that. If you have a high pH, it'll help to bring that pH down. I think gypsum is a neutral calcium product. Yeah, I love gypsum. Fact is, I've used gypsum dispensers for years and years in Honeycrisp to treat bitter pit, to where you just pour a bag of gypsum right into this tank. And it has a little sprinkler on there, and it just dissolves that gypsum, and all day long it kind of trickles out into the field, and it's a great way to fight bitter pit. But yeah, gypsum is absolutely beneficial for cherry farms. Yeah, if you have the right soil situation. So yeah, big fan. Use a lot of it. Nitish Kameta, for dry, sunny orchards packed with water, we are thinking 890 on Gala with bi-bomb system of dual tall spindle from one graft instead of traditional large spacing seedling plants. Would you prefer it? Instead of large spacing seedling plants. Would I prefer it? Yes, Natish, I would prefer it. I am a fan of formal systems. I'm a fan of formal systems for the whole life of the tree. They're easier to train. They're easier for workers to understand. They're easier to prune. They're easier for a worker to walk up to the tree and know exactly how many apples are expected to be on that tree because they're all the same. They're going to know exactly how many fruiting positions every single tree ought to have. So yes, I would definitely do the high intensity system with a dual tall spindle from the graft. Absolutely, because I want a formal system that I can rely on and that is repetitive, where every tree from one tree to the next is uniform and everything is the same, and I can have a system that everybody understands. I think that's very important. A lot of good questions tonight, anything else? Well, thank you. That was a lot of questions. It was nice to have everyone on board tonight. I'm looking forward to getting back to the harvest tomorrow. Yeah, grateful for the harvest, grateful for a good crop, grateful to have all of you on board. If you don't mind, if you can click that follow button or that subscriber button, I appreciate that. That helps us. And I'm grateful to my wife Marlon for managing this page and answering you and writing down all the questions and doing all the wonderful, beautiful editing so that hopefully we're helping people. So keep those questions coming. And anything else, honey? You got something else there? She's writing something here. Let's see what she's got here. Jordan McIntyre. Text.
Send
Oh, send a text?
stars.
Oh, stars. Okay, very good. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that. Well, anyway, good evening. It's nice to have you on board. And hey, we'll see you out in the field. Thank you. We did it.